I think with the process, we'll move forward on the general budget, and we'll bring the positions and salaries forward at the end. Are you okay with me?
Yeah, that's just fine. Perhaps we should look at those. My recommendation is that after answering any questions your board might have as it relates to the presentation, then to the extent that any of you, and we could kind of start at the beginning with the administrative office budget, if you have a question on any particular budget unit, let me know. If not, we will skip it. And to your point, Supervisor Toffanelli, when we get to the capital improvements budget, then perhaps is a good time to speak about those projects. Does that work?
Thank you.
So, were there questions on the presentation itself?
I'm not hearing any questions at this time. Ms. Fullendorf, you good to move forward? Yes. Okay. So where do you want to start here? We didn't go...
So if we were to start...
Administration.
Are there any questions on the administrative office budget units?
You know, this is to the point. I would like to add to the discussion at the end of the meeting. Assistant CAO, I would like to add to that discussion. But that would be the positions and salaries that we're discussing at the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Is anyone opposed to adding that to the list at the end of the meeting? Okay, so we'll add that to the end of the meeting, Krista.
Okay.
Board members. Should I give you a moment? Ms. Calloway.
What order did you want to go in? Did you want to go by department, or if I have a question on something else, which isn't?
If it's a general question that flows from the presentation, then I'm happy to take that now. Otherwise, and I'm happy to entertain any question now, but it might be easiest if we go through administration, and then, for example, if no one has a question on the airport, just move forward until we get to another budget unit where there's a question. But that's, if you would prefer we do it differently, we certainly can.
Whatever system y'all want is just fine. I'll wait till my...
We're going to go through every one of these?
No, I think that we can go down the list, and if somebody has a question to that, then we can address that. If there's no one that has a question, then we'll move on to the next one. I guess we should go in order. That way, you know, there's a lot here, but I don't think everyone has questions on everything here. I hope. Okay, so let me start with the airport, because we just talked about administration, unless somebody else had a question on administration. If anybody has a question on airport? I'm going to move on to the assessor's office after their report. I have one for the assessor's office, and I did call you about it. The RFP, how are we proceeding with that? Is that in the budget book? Where is it at? And how are we working forward on that RFP? Because as we discussed earlier, that could be a point of more
Absolutely understood.
income, not income, but
revenue generating activities flow from the assessor's office, absolutely. And so as Assessor Davis, myself, and HR Director Hawkins discussed with your board recently, there is both a an RFP that we would look to and are in the process of putting together with the assessor's office to go out and see if we can find an external consultant to help bring the role into compliance. Along with that, on a parallel track, not in place of it, is that the assessor is working with other counties, one in particular, to see whether it's possible to bring in and senior staff from those counties to do training and also facilitate in getting the role caught up. So there is some precedent for that, as I understand the assessor's office, and I'm welcome for her to jump in here, or our HR director if they would like to correct me or interject, but there has been precedent where our assessor has brought in staff from other counties to help train in the past. So a two-track system. We are not yet done with the RFP, but it is in the works. Deputy CAO Nicotero is working on it and has been as we come to the culmination of this part of the budget process. That will be one of the top priorities for the administrative office, and has been. In terms of the actual budget, so let me... You'll note that there is very little, let me just confirm here. Right. So very little salary savings has been budgeted in this budget unit. In addition to that, and I know that there are other potential uses slated, but there is $160,000 in services and supplies, as well as other funds in this budget unit that may or may not be used for other budgeted purposes. Between those two things, and understanding that we typically experience a lot of salary savings in the hundreds, $300,000 to $400,000 range, there should be more than sufficient appropriations in this budget unit to cover the cost of an RFP or the subsequent contract.
Any further questions on the assessors?
I do.
Yes, Ms. Holdorf.
I think it might cover a couple of departments, but it was highlighted into the assessor's office for the remodel or reorg of the office. I know we spoke about it. It seems like that seems, at least on that floor, is that something that we could consider at a broader scale on that floor rather than just one office, recognizing that there could be some one main front desk for multiple, and then from a safety and space planning approach on that floor with clerks and the tax assessors?
Certainly. I think that's absolutely something, and in fact might be something the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee would want to look at. That's a determination for your board to make. We'll have another opportunity to speak more in depth about the capital improvement project requests that are in the budget when we get to the CIP portion. But certainly that is your board's certainly fair for us to discuss. Just as a side note, it's been an interesting time, and when we received your direction to form, and have since formed, both the ad hoc committee for jail repairs and animal services and the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee, the Standing Brown Act Committee, we have moved those forward, and we are definitely engaged in the process. We're looking at our next Strategic Planning and Financing Committee meeting on the 21st. So, but in terms of timing and incorporating and getting any firm recommendations from those committees, and then my being able to then incorporate them into this budget, because of that timing, there's been a certain, I have done my best to interpret where I thought there were opportunities that were consistent with board direction and the discussions we've had in those committees, but they are both in their infancy, and so these recommendations are not yet fully vetted with either of them. So just as a kind of a baseline background floor for that, so that everyone is on the same page when we have these discussions, it's totally the prerogative of your board to direct me in terms of how to take next steps.
Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you. Kind of my questions are kind of editorial, but just sort of note. I don't like the term succession planning when you have an elected official. The voters do succession planning. It's just an editorial comment that I would hope land somewhere.
Understood.
Who do we have, we also had a long discussion about the assessor's office, and I didn't think we came to a conclusion as a board. We obviously have a budget here, and as Chris has pointed out, we can adjust that. But all the changes, so many of these changes are different than what we discussed. They're all going to be codified here in the personnel and the budget. And so it's sort of a budget is not a backdoor, but it's just a different way of going about that. I don't know if I'm comfortable with the reorganization, but I am comfortable in allocating a budget and then choosing and then helping come up with a solution to how we're going to be more productive and get some things done in that office. So, like I said, so there in the broad sense, I'm okay with it. Personnel changes, I hope we have a robust conversation. For example, I don't understand who's handling the outside Cadastral GIS work. Seen other places that I just don't know who's going to do that work. Is it important? I've always been told that it was super important. Maybe it's not as important today as it was in prior budgets. So those are the kind of questions I hope we could work out. I'd rather not do that in budget, because we're allocating a chunk of money as a holder, and then we could go through the organization. I don't know where the rest of the board sits.
So on that note, particularly as it relates to the assessor's office, but, and again, totally for your board to direct in terms of how we move through this conversation, but one of our supervisors will need to sit out for a portion of that assessor conversation as it relates to personnel. And for that and other reasons, we're thinking of taking the personnel requests at the end after we discuss the budgets as a whole. Would that work and address?
That would totally work for what I'd like to talk. Yes. Another question I've got is under professional and specialized services. We had 157,000 last year budget and 160 this year. Is that a contract that's catching us up?
I invite Ms. Davis to jump in here. I'm trying to pull it up in OpenGov, although I do believe that that is...
Page 120, item 5271.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah, it's the 160, I think, for this year.
120 of the top.
Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer to the last question, which is the 160,000 in professional and specialized services catching us up? The answer is no. That particular line item includes state mandated audits that we contract out to other counties, as well as a line item for our scanning project so that we can protect the files and digitize them so that we can work more efficiently if this pandemic continues or we have another similar type of incident, or if another wildfire actually gets closer to Government Center and takes it out. I can answer other questions that have been asked before this, but that one seemed like one that needed an immediate response.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, is it going to be 100, is this a one-time expense, or is this an ongoing expense that we'll see year over year?
A portion of it is ongoing year over year. Approximately 10,000 of that is ongoing year after year. The balance is a one-time expense for the scanning project, as I've discussed with the CAO. It also requires that we will bring in some extra hire student interns, I would hope, who would be able to help us with purging the files so that we don't pay to scan obsolete documents.
So do we spend $157,000 last year on this? Is this a $300,000 project? Or is this?
No, we did not spend anything on it. It has carried over for a couple of years with a contribution from Teeter to cover it since it's computer related.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Garamendi? Not this time?
Not this time.
Ms. Callaway? No? Mr. Oh, Ms. Fullendorf?
On page 116, 4721, the grant, can you explain more about that? I noticed it says we have not met the minimum requirements of the grant. So what does that mean? Is the county on the hook, or what? Are we able to allocate that grant funding to something this fiscal year, or this upcoming fiscal year? Or
At
are we
this-
going to have to pay it back?
Okay, at this point, I have left all of the remaining grant funds untouched for the 2021-22 fiscal year. And the reason for that is if we have a problem with the Department of Finance, I'm hopeful it will be limited by the funds that we have remaining. So none of it is being budgeted on the off chance that DOF gets a little testy. However, last week we got some fairly good news after some active interactions with the legislature's Assembly Budget Committee and the Senate Budget and Review Committee. Both of those committees have approved the California Assessors Association proposal to continue the grant at a much higher rate with a much lower county match. And so I'm hopeful as a result of the work that we've been doing with Department of Finance and the state that we will be able to work through this. I also believe, based on conversations I've had with Department of Finance, that they might be reasonable about it, but honestly, they're a little miffed because I chair the committee that went around their back to the legislature when we couldn't get through DOF. So I'm hopeful we're going to actually get more grant money and that I will be able to use some of those funds for this scanning project for the staff to come in and help purge the file. And I'm also hopeful, in partial answer, just to repeat, that the exposure we may have will be limited to the amount that is sitting in the grant fund right now. In other words, we've expended some of it. I expect the balance at year end to be about $375,000 to $400,000. If the Department of Finance gets testy with us, I think we can limit our exposure to what we have to give back to them. And
I'm still concerned about the sentence of we have not met the minimum requirement. So what, and this is a hypothetical, are they going to even consider us to get more grant funding if we haven't even met the minimum requirement, either the current grant cycle?
I don't think so. I don't think we have that problem, let me say that. We have been able to show a return on investment that Department of Finance is reasonably okay with. Our difficulty, as I've explained to your board, is in actually hiring the staff who were targeted for hiring with that grant money. So we have not been able to hire the staff that we said we would hire. We have not been able to complete the scanning project, and that is where they have the problem. But to the extent that we have had expenses, those revenues have had about a 300% return on investment, and that's how we're keeping this sort of tamped down in terms of concerns on their side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, at this time, we're going to move on past the assessor's office.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I may say so,
yes,
we've got a long ways to go here.
right.
We have 3 fire chiefs sitting here. Is there any possible way we could get them to come up and what they're here for? I believe it's 172 and
Yeah, no.
DOT tax. And then maybe till tomorrow that we get to that. So-
I concur, yeah. Very good point taken, Mr. Toffenelli. Gentlemen, can you come up and say your piece and see where we want to go from there? And then we'll move on from there and possibly, since we've been blessed to have DA Yook in here, that we can possibly move on to hers next. You okay? Okay. So we'll start off with the fire chiefs.
Thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Toffenelli.
Go ahead.
I have to trigger my comment, sorry. Well, I have to have that mic up so high that it has feedback with the one on the table. So I can shut it, there you go, now you can be heard. Sorry about that.
The analysis that I've just handed out to you is to give you an idea of the impact of the 25% that we get for TOT and the 10% that we get from Prop 172. And when I say we, I'm talking about the 8 other fire districts, okay? Because every penny we get as a whole, we have to divide 9 ways. And what I did was indicate how much money we have been allocated as of April 30th. And you could see that each fire district received $20,768, which is a couple of $1,000s over what we budgeted last year. But working with our CAO, she was kind enough to give me the information about how's it look for 2021-22, because we need that information to budget for next year. And based on the dollars, the revenue that was collected already, the indication was that there's another $895,000 that came in. That translates to $233,000 for the fire department, $233 for sheriff, $233 for roads, $233 for the visitors bureau. But when we divide our share up, that comes to $24,848. Now, we're not sure yet if we're going to get the rest of that money for this fiscal year. But for the next fiscal year, I'm here to ask you, how much can we count on for next year? So we're talking about $45,000 per district compared to $410,000 for the sheriff and $410,000 for the other 3. When we look at Prop 172, we see a similar situation, the only difference being that the fire departments, each budgeted $14,250 for this year. So far, we've collected $18,700. That's great. We've got and another $4,800 was collected so far this year to date that has not yet been allocated to any of the fire departments. So the question is, are we going to get the rest of that money as well? And I want to just give you an example of how important $18,000 is to our fire districts, okay? Right now...
Just one moment. Ms. Palmata, while he's talking, can you please mute your thing so we don't get the feedback?
Okay.
Yeah, that'll solve the problem. My apologies for interrupting.
No problem. Last year and this year, we put paramedics on Lake Tulloch Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, every single weekend from Memorial Day to Labor Day. That was an unbudgeted item last year, and we're doing it again this year. Paramedic is on the lake for 12 hours with the sheriff. We had to train them in water rescue for paramedics. We had to buy them uniforms and equipment for being out in the sun all day on a boat. Plus, these are per diem paramedics. We pay them $25 an hour. Well, they don't always show up. If they don't show up, I have to have a full-time captain paramedic cover for him that day. His average hourly rate is $35, but because it's overtime, it's going to be time and a half. And that turns out to be a lot of money. So the cost for us is between $11,000 and $15,000 a season. And this is just one example for us. Every department has all these examples. So I'm really asking two things. One, can we count on 100% of the money you collect this year? And can we use that to budget for next year, 100% of the money you collect? That's it. Any questions?
I don't have any at this time. I think as we move forward with the budget, my personal perspective is as that money comes in and it's actual, that not going forward with projected, that I from my perspective,
Yeah.
those actuals of what we've collected
Yeah.
are justifiably allocated. And I, as one, I'm not speaking for the entire board, am comfortable moving forward and saying, as one, that 25% should be allocated, that are actuals that we've collected, and should continue moving forward in that fashion. But I would leave that to the entire board to either agree with or disagree with. But I for one, stand on that position.
I just want to
Mr.
make sure I
Garamendi.
understand what you just said, okay? You agree with the 25% allocation of all the money that's collected in this fiscal year to each, that goes to each particular group, in our case, the fire department?
Yes.
Good, great.
I just want to, Mr. Chair, for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Short, thank you very much for this. This is very good. You know, you all understand the challenge that we face.
I do.
And we set forward this budget, and we play the over-under. So if we collect less money, we owe you that 25% that we budget. If we collect more money, you would get more, you know, you could see how we come in. So if we collect less TOT than we have budgeted, we're going to have to cover the difference. If we collect more, you want that difference. And so in many ways, you kind of got to choose your poison. Do you play and hope, bet on the come that we're going to make more money in the year? Or do you want that guaranteed built in? Because otherwise, if we go on a fluctuate and we bet on the future, then we get to halfway point or end of the year next year and we don't have that money, you won't get that money.
I'm operating on one assumption, that when the board agreed to do this, to give us the 25% and to give us the 10%, it was our understanding that it was going to be 25% and 10% of the 100% that's collected.
All right.
That was our good faith understanding.
Well, you know, here's my point. No one's arguing, I don't hear anybody up here arguing about the 25%. We're just saying, you know, do you want it both ways? You know, because sometimes we come in under and sometimes we come over. We're taking a shot trying to put together a budget. And, you know, if we come in short, we're going to make it up. If we come in over, you want that, but you don't want to deal with the downside too. So if you want 100%, we could discuss that as a board, but we are partners in that case, and you are gambling with us.
You know, if I had to choose, I can only speak for Copperopolis, I'd go for that.
Okay,
I'd go the over-under. I'm prepared to do that. I would do that. And the reason I would do that is because all of my people, myself, we show up. we do the job. No matter, let me finish. No matter how much money we have in our budgets, okay? It's like the paramedics on the lake. We don't have budget for that. We're going to find it somewhere. We'll find it somewhere. We might cut buying new
Mr. Schwartz, you
hoses.
think I'm arguing with you, but I'm not.
Yeah,
We're
well, I'm giving
partners
you
in
the
this.
answer. We'll take the over-under. I will.
That's,
Sure.
Jack, that's how I interpreted what he said.
I agree.
It's of whatever's collected, we just want the 25%.
I just want to make sure they understand the risk
Yeah.
that they're in. Because if everything goes to crap this year and the economy falls out, you're going to get short playing that game. If the economy stays strong, you know, you could win, but there's a gamble to this.
If
I would
may.
like Krista to, she can say it in better words than I did earlier. We discussed this in depth. I think she can articulate it in a good way that I think we can all agree on.
Can I say
one?
one
No,
thing?
you can wait 1 minute, Chief. I appreciate it.
Mine's all good.
But she's going to articulate it better than I could, and I appreciate it.
So one approach for your board to consider that may be amenable to our chiefs would be to do a lift pack proposal such that when we get, and I tried to hit on this earlier, although perhaps it wasn't entirely clear, but so for example, now the numbers that are in the budget are numbers that are based on information we had at that time about year-to-date actuals. And so in this case, as opposed to some of our other revenue streams and balances, we expect that number to go up between now and June 30 when we get to closing the year-end books. So the idea would be, and is the proposition, that we budget at recommended based on what we understand to be actuals for the current fiscal year. We true that up at final budget, again, based on what we know to have been the actuals as of 6/30 for this current fiscal year, and that is how it works. And so addressing the concern that fire departments receive 100% of what that 25% allocation would, that's awkward, the entire 25% allocation for this current fiscal year, and then pending board direction, we would be having a similar conversation this time next year based on what next fiscal year's actuals are and at both recommended and final budget, if you see my point, which would then address the concern of the fire districts getting the full 25% allocation, but alleviate the concern of the over-under because it would be a situation based on actuals. The risk, I mean, it's got less risk in terms of a question mark, a little bit more in terms of, you know, what happens if next year is a bad fiscal year, revenue year, because then that was our strategy going in, but that's the question before you.
Krista, when we do this, when do we distribute the money to the fire districts?
I defer to the auditor controller, but on a quarterly basis, I believe.
On a quarterly basis?
Ms. Gomes, please correct me if I'm wrong.
So we're talking about, we'll go in arrears for this year is what you're suggesting. And going forward, we're doing a quarterly payout based upon real-time tax info, correct?
Actually, the proposition is that we would go in arrears, so this coming 21-22, once we have that final number in August, if your board approves it in September, then the fire departments would know, or districts would know, that on or about sometime in October for the quarter ended 9/30, they're going to get $400,000 or $450,000, whatever that final number is for this current fiscal year in August. They'll just get 4 quarterly payments that comprise that amount over the course of next fiscal year. Then, if this strategy were to be adopted and maintained by the board, this time next fiscal year, we'll be talking about the year-to-date actuals of next fiscal year and then doing a true-up at that budget. And so the departments would always know, barring something totally unprecedented or unforeseen, that because of course your board can always change its direction, but the thinking would be that the fire departments would know what their allocation was going to be based on the prior year actuals.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Was that clear?
For 2019, for 2018-19, we budgeted $28,000. In 2019-20, we budgeted $33,000. That's based on actuals. And for 2019-20, based on actuals, $40,885. But for 2021, for this year, we only budgeted $18,000 because we saw what was going on with COVID. We forecasted, even though there was going to be, even though we're now getting 12% instead of 6%, we just didn't see a lot of people coming up to town. We really didn't anticipate the kinds of people that would be coming up, the amount of people that actually did come up just to get away from their homes, So we got lucky. But the important thing here is we're realistic when we allocate. We sit around a room, the 9 of us, and we decide this is what we can live with because this is the right thing to do based on our ability to forecast.
And with that said, I just wanted to say my 2 cents. Thank you. I thought coming here, I might have to fight for the 25%. I was on the original committee with Kathy Galliano, and me and my wife went to the fair. We advocated. My fire engine was on the flyer. We were all in. So I appreciate what you're doing. But I also want you to understand that I have to do the same thing that you do. I have a board of 9 directors. I have an auditor. I have to come up with a preliminary budget, and I just speculate what my budget's going to be. And then in September, I have to take a look at it again. I got to report to my auditor, and it goes the highs and lows. We understand with the economy, and I'm good with what you talked about. I understand that it's not always going to be high, and nothing in my budget is guaranteed. What I've learned from my auditor, Marvin, he's been very good with me. Understand, Rich, it's just paper. It's paper. And if you can get your board to understand that, you're going to live the highs and lows. So with that said, I understand that. I just want to try to be upfront, transparent, to argue for what we did several years ago when I put my time with my wife and trying to get us where we needed to go. But I also understand that, and I appreciate you for advocating for us. Because the governor, it's awesome. He's taking care of the California Division of Forestry. It's amazing. I wish I had that, but I don't. I have to go to my community and I have to get a tax measure, which unfortunately for us, we have been unsuccessful over the years. So every little penny counts, and I just appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chief. I'm by no means advocating that we don't pay. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on how this bet's going to go. And does that mean, if we're going to play this, does that mean we're going to withhold the last quarterly payment so we come up with the true-up? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts for what you're proposing, Chief, and you could lose.
That's
and we
okay.
can guarantee a win.
Here, let me just say one thing.
You just don't want me having this conversation next year and saying, Chief, you're not getting your last quarterly payment because the
No,
TOT
I think you're holding it off, right? Because I don't think you've finally decided whether we'll get it or not.
Okay, what part?
Yeah.
The amount you're holding back.
This all boils down to midterm a couple months ago when we did that, and it was said that we were in excess $800 and something thousand in TOT.
Right.
We didn't distribute that. It was voted on by this board to not do anything with it, put it in contingencies. That's what's driving this whole thing. They're saying this time, are we going to get the 25%, whether it's low or whether it's high, or at midterm, are you guys going to say, no, we're in excess of what we forecasted, we're going to keep it? They just want to know, and I'm in favor of giving the 25%. I was back then. That's what we agreed to do. And so I think that's exactly what they're asking because of what happened at midterm. So.
I'm in support of that. I mean, we're looking at 29,000 change per. I mean, I'd have no problem coming up this year. I'm trying to think out in the future for what it's going to be next year. We know we've got this year and we're in good shape. You just want to make sure that if the fire departments are good with that, we come up with a way to do it. That's fine, but
I don't think the fire department's going to have a problem with that. If we get 100% of everything that's collected, we're prepared to take the good with the bad. I'm speaking for myself. I'm speculating on what the other departments do.
You're correct, Joe.
Oh, there you go. And just one other thing, one other point. I've only been with the fire service now for 5 years. Prior to that, I was in the private sector. I never experienced anything like a second chance, okay? You do your budget's done, you got to live by it. Plus or minus 2%, you're okay. Plus or minus 3% or more, you got a problem, okay? The first time they told me, it doesn't really matter how much you budget, we get to fix it in September, okay? That to me is alien. And till this day, I insist that everybody in my department, all of the chiefs, all of the captains, all of the department heads, give me their best case scenario 2 ways. I want 2 numbers. I want to know what you need, and I want to know what you want. And until I look at the whole budget, look at the whole bottom line, and I see if I'm going to be negative or not, we make the cuts we need to cut. Okay? If we're sitting here forecasting that we're only going to get $15,000 for a particular, for TOT, when we were counting on $25,000, $30,000, because we forecasted the $15,000. We knew what was going on. So it's not a big deal. But if we expect and forecast $40,000 and we only get $20,000, now I'm hurting. I'm hurting, okay? What I'm telling you is we live within our means. That's the key. We live within our means. We make it happen. Whatever has to happen, we make it happen. If we're over budget in a particular area, there are things that we don't have to buy. For last year, I had engines out, I think, at least 16 weeks out of the year. I had one engine out, cost me $32,000 to fix it, but those are unanticipated expenses, but when we have them, we've got to cut in other areas, and that's what we do. So yes, I'm saying, I think we're all prepared to play that game, because that's the way we budget, that's the way we forecast.
Okay, then, and if we're going in arrears, we need to come up with, by your numbers, $266,920 to get to that mark, correct?
Say that again, I want to make sure I understand.
266,920?
If I may, Supervisor Garamendi, that's actually rolled up in the number that's in the current budget. So we would be truing up for whatever TOT funds are received over and above that amount between now and March 31st and June 30.
And that's exactly what she was talking about when we're saying when we come back with the final budget and come up with the actuals.
Then we'll know what that number is exactly.
We'll know what that is.
So we increase it by 50,000 or 100 or whatever the case may be at that point, and then they'll get 4 equal installments in the next fiscal year, and we'll go through the same process again next year, should the board direct that to be the methodology.
We hope we get 4 even payments, right? I mean, we're not going to take money out of their pocket. I don't know. I'll have to see how you write this whole thing up. Personally, I'm not a gambler, so good luck.
It's alien to me also.
We're supporting you. We're going to support you. I just, I don't know if I'd take that gamble, but.
Right.
What do we need, 3 out of 5?
So, are we all in favor on true up on 25% TOT at this time? Gary's a yes. Ms. Callaway's a yes. I'm a yes.
Yes.
It looks like we got 5 yeses on a true up on the actuals.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
On TOT.
Yeah, on TOT.
On TOT, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to talk about Prop 172 or not?
Well, if you want to talk about it, you're here, so.
It's the same
got the
concept.
moment.
It's the same thing. We budgeted $14,250. County's already collected $18,700, and that's through April, I believe. I'm sure people have been buying stuff over the last 3 months, April, May, June. It's a busy time. Are we going to get that money too? Same concept, same principle, same arguments.
unless Ms. Von Lotta has any comments to that. Gary? Yes. Ms. Callaway? 10%. 10%? I'm a yes, 10%. Yes, 10%. Yes, 10%.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You guys have a good day. We appreciate everything you do for the community.
You bet. Appreciate it.
Just as a point of clarification on Prop 172, we did bring a mid-year adjustment that your board had approved, and that same true-up was already in the works to be made before June 30 or just after June 30. So there's no actual issue there.
Okay.
Sure, just one quick clarification. So just so we're clear, that 266, we've already rolled that up in there, right, in the budget? So that's,
Yes.
we don't have to come up with 266,000. It's already in.
The 200 and it's 410 altogether, what's in there.
The difference.
The 223,000 is already budgeted to be distributed. What we would be adding to that is just the delta between whatever was incurred as of that date and what's incurred once we get the finals in August.
Okay.
And we can drew it up and start from the beginning on July 1st.
Indeed.
Okay. That'll be clean.
Well, that wasn't painful. I'm glad we're all on the same page, to tell you the truth. Okay, so right now, we got them out. The DA says she can wait. Thank you, Ms. Yook. We'll move on to the auditor controller, and does anybody have any questions? If there's no questions or nothing from the auditor controller, we'll move on to building. Any questions on building or any statements from the building official? That's a negative, so cannabis. Any questions on cannabis or anything? Yes, sir.
I did even ask questions yesterday, talked to Chris on go to county funds overview. And I think it needs to be corrected.
Give me a clear page.
I'm going to page 40.
Page 40. Budget overview. Thank you.
Page 40.
840.
40.
Under cannabis regulations, third column over, general fund contributions. It says here that we have a general fund contribution of $66,241.
Yes.
And are we actually using general fund dollars to keep the cannabis system alive?
No, that's an error that will be corrected at final budget.
That will be corrected at final budget. Okay, thank you.
Good catch, Mr. Toffanelli.
Page 40.
You're saying it's sustaining itself, Krista?
Yes, indeed.
Very good. Hopefully get to the point where it's more than that. Just jumped all over this cannabis. Is there any further questions or statements on the cannabis? With that, we'll move on to capital improvement projects. Ms. Callaway, Mr. Toffanelli, anything on capital improvement? Mr. Toffanelli.
Yes, I do. I just want to make a point in the animal services facility at the very bottom. We're committing $600K for this year, and at this point, we don't even have a drawing, we don't have anything to build this building, but we're committing money to it, and I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying the committee has not brought anything back to this board for approval on either a architectural hiring of an architect or an engineer, or what type of building, if we buy a pre-engineered metal building and put it up, we have not come back to the board. We plan on coming back as soon as possible, but right now it's saying 2.1 million over 3 years. I can't say that's correct because I don't know what we're building. But we are putting aside 600, whether we spend that $600,000 this year to get to a shell of a building or not, going forward. I hope we get to that point, but at this point, the committee hasn't got anything bringing back to the board, so I just want to make that
Is
clear.
that a placeholder on the 600,000 for the time being, providing that, our ad hoc committee is able to come up with something to bring before the board so that we can move forward, and then whatever gets spent of that?
So that is a rough estimate for what a shell would be. This was, and Supervisor Toffenelli is quite correct, no official recommendations have yet been made. However, we have had 2 or 3 meetings, including Animal Services on 2 occasions regarding, actually 3 meetings, Animal Services on 2 occasions to discuss this with our facilities manager, and have multiple estimates that 3, I believe, that indicate that 600,000 would be an approximate number for getting a shell in place. The idea would be to do it over a 3-year window, but again, Supervisor Toffenelli is quite correct. This has not yet been fully worked out. However, I also note that save for, and I would be happy to bring anything related to this project back to your board, but certainly any project, a project of this magnitude would need to go to bid, would need to come back to board in order for those contracts to be approved. So while it's not necessarily ideal to placeholder budget, so to speak, I would say this is a hybrid of that, and that for considering this has been a project so long in the works, I did move forward with the recommendation to allocate that 600,000 from certificates of participation, one of the named appropriate uses for which is in fact an animal shelter. So, but clearly up to your board to give direction on that.
Mr. Toffenelli?
Yes, and if we're done with that, any other questions on that item?
No, go ahead.
Okay, the other item that's not on here that hopefully will appear in our final budget is the DA's office that we've committed to also as a board. The reason it's not on here is because we're going through the justice funds with getting an MOU in place for those funds, so we know exactly what funds we're going to have available through that and what other COP or what other funds we can go forward with for it, but at least those monies will be on here, and that project will be on here because it has been a priority to this board.
I agree 100%, Mr. Toffenelli. We've took vast steps to demolition the old jail. We have a place for the DA's facility, and yes, we are going through the MOU with the courts so that we can properly allocate that money in a legitimate manner. So, hopefully we can move that forward to the final budget. Whether or not, the plans and everything culminate this year or the following fiscal year will be somewhat in the same area as Animal Services. Are we all in agreement, Mr. Toffenelli, yes, for final budget on DA facility?
Yes. It provided the MOU is signed.
Right, providing the MOU.
And we know the amount of funds that we can put in.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Ms. Callaway?
The MOU is signed.
Okay, I'm a yes if the MOU is signed. Mr. Garamendi?
I'm a yes, but I want to make sure that this money doesn't just sit in the account. I want it allocated, find out that there's some of it's going to go in planning immediately, so we could draw that up.
Yes.
Yes.
I concur.
I think that was.
Ms.
I'm sorry.
Fulmore? Okay.
I think that was part of our ad hoc committee that we were on. That was the plan. I think it still is.
Great. We just need, and I want to just add, Mr. Chair, that on the Animal Services, I want to make sure that I like the idea of it being a savings account still, we have the money to make the investment, we should make it, but we have to spend some of that and get some plans drawn. And I have great faith in Supervisor Toffenali and Callaway that I heard on that.
I concur. I mean, the sooner we start building things, the sooner we don't have to pay $300 per sheet of half-inch plywood. So
Also, if I might, miss a lot of,
at some point, it looks like it's going that way. So, you know, our buildings keep getting smaller with time, so.
Mr. Chair, one other item, from reading the HHSA application, the public health office relocation is on hold, so that should be removed from the CIP. Yes.
Yes, there was a timing issue there. As you know, those leases are not moving forward at this time. Unless something changes, then when this comes back for final adoption in September, that line item will be removed.
This is germane to what I hope we're going to talk about sometime this month, about the philosophy of this board, on campus, off campus. We need to make a choice that we could do all the work we're working on.
True.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on capital improvement projects?
I have
Mr. Guerin? I mean, sorry, Mr.
Toffenali.
Toffenali. I'm sorry, I'm going back and
pulled
forth.
a Marita on
Mr. Toffenali.
There's I think 3 items on here that have to do with the jail, but none of those items are what the ad hoc committee was put in place for. None of these are any of the structural deficits that we talked about that were done during construction. The HVACs are not part of that, which I'm surprised to see on here. The laundry, I do have a question for Patrick, because they possibly could, but I don't think those particular things are. I think the dryers are the ones that are affected. This says the life of the equipment, which could mean it's through its cycle. But we still have that project, once we get the ad hoc committee back and determine what we're going to do, it could appear on here, and I don't know if it'll appear on here by September or not, but we'll work towards getting that on here and looking at it and what direction we're going to take when we come back to the board on it. But none of these jail items are part of that. They're all separate issues from that.
Gary, do you have any?
Turned it off. You turned it off.
Sorry. Gary, do you have any, we got 1.16 million on this list. Do you have any idea? Spitball?
I don't have a ballpark estimate. Our next meeting on this issue is Patrick is supposed to be putting together all the outstanding items that are left that hadn't been taken care of. And once we get that at our next meeting, we'll have more of a ballpark figure of what we're looking at and how we're going to move forward on it, whether we're going to take care of it and then go down the line of what we need to do, or are we going to go and meet with the vendors and the contractors and find out whether they're going to help pay for it or what. But that'll be probably their next meeting.
These items that are listed here, you and Marina know the jail better than anybody on this.
Yeah, so
Not from the inside, but from the other side. But they all seem correct to you?
Many nights she spent there. As part of her cell.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to point that out.
All right.
I have one question. The top item, 5635, will that dollar amount be reconsidered in my comment earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Thank you for following up. Yes.
Verifying. Okay,
Right,
thank you.
because it's line item in the assessor's office underneath the 130,000 total, on the total amount, am I correct? So that's 124,000 of the 130,000 for,
Are you talking about in the narrative?
yeah.
We actually backed that out of the budget unit itself and then rebudgeted the request here in the capital improvements budget at the 124,000. figure. And yes, Supervisor Vollendorf, this is a good time to talk about if you want to discuss whether making a different assessment of whether to incorporate the spaces as opposed to not.
When you talk about if I may, when you talk about the floor area that you're talking about, there's the tax collector that's in the middle of it, which would be probably part of your consideration. But the other side is the clerk's office, which I understand has already gone through this process in the not too distant past. Is that correct, Ms. Villanlotta?
I would need to, yes, okay, yes.
Yes, so I think that half of the building's been taken care of more recently, so it would be,
Mr. Donovan, the only thing they did was put in the windows. They didn't reconfigure the office itself.
yeah, they did.
Maybe I need to clarify my comment from earlier. What I was seeing was one, instead of going to multiple offices, you gain the hallway, you make one check-in at the beginning of the hallway, and then that way, if there is an emergency, they can lock down that one location, but then they gain more room because of office space by adding in the hallway area. And that's fine. If they don't want, it just seems to make sense if you're going to redo that area, you gain more space by somehow utilizing the hallway space.
I understand what you're talking
Okay.
about. We're not talking about, what $124,000 does not move walls by any means. It does cubicles in other areas. It does not move walls.
I know, but as Krista said, this was the conversation to have.
No,
Do
I'm
we
not-
want to open it? Do we want to consider opening it more for a discussion, or just keep it limited to the cubicles? It's fine. This is the time to talk about it. If it's not, it's just the cubicles and we move on. Just want to make sure that there's an opportunity to have that, because it doesn't make sense to put the cubicles if the next step is you're going to be reconsidering the floor plan. Not to hijack anybody's plans, it's just all decks on the table. And I'm not offended either way, I just want to make sure it's open dialogue now with everyone rather than behind.
It's a consideration. That's a much larger plan in my mind, but that's just from my experience. But go ahead, Mr. Toffenelli.
Well, yeah, and what Amanda is talking about, I think there was some talk about if we were going to consolidate the elections office and the assessor's office and make that all one big office when you walk in with the counter, either are or whatever. And that's a big undertaking to do. $124,000, you could probably move one wall, but it's not going to do much of anything else. And it depends if it's a load-bearing wall and what you're moving.
Very good point, Mr. Toffenelli. And I understand where she's coming from, and not to take away from what the conversation would be. I think right now, in the interest of what our plan is and what the assessor is requesting on moving forward for space and be able to provide that as she fills the ranks of her employees and being able to implement it, this may be, I think long-term, yes, that's a consideration, long-term, but right now it's not in the cards. Let me just get to that. It's not in the cards right now.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't sure where you were going, but if it's tied back to the consolidation of these offices, we've already discussed that and made a decision not to go down that path.
It wasn't tied
thought
to
we did.
consolidation, it was more of a global approach. As we start these CIP projects, rather than keeping the narrow tunnel vision of just siloed department, why not expand that conversation to a global where multiple departments could potentially benefit? And that's fine. And it can be something that we bring back to our committee and discuss for future, but I was not looking at it as a consolidation. I was looking at a global approach to it in general, just in a general capacity.
I think overall, long-term, that global approach goes hand in hand with what you discussed, whether we're going to satellite out. I mean, everything. It comes down to everything on that global approach. So yes, it all needs to be part of the long-term conversation. But now, for this time, I think this may do, as long as everyone approves of that $124,000 for what it's being proposed for. You okay with that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next one in your budget book, Jack?
Clerk recorder and elections.
Okay. Any questions? Any statements by Ms. Turner? We'll move on to the coroner public administrator. Coroner and public administrator. Any questions? Any statements?
I'll go ahead and just make a brief statement. This budget unit is essentially status quo. As you may note, when in the sheriff's department budget, there is what I spoke about earlier regarding the investigatory sheriff coroner budget unit, should your board just determine to combine those two offices, just as a reminder.
And that, thanks, sorry, just gotta be ready on the 15th to get rid of this. And the 275 that we budgeted earlier, that we spoke about earlier, that's planning money, basically.
Indeed, and I think that's an incredibly high number for planning, so should that initiative not be directed to move forward, then most of those funds would revert back to the general fund.
County Council. Mr. Garamendi, your light's on. How much can you afford, Sarah? I'll leave that alone. I'll just say her last page is 187, and I'll leave it at that. We'll move on to District Attorney. Miss Yook. Or District Attorney Yook. Let me say it properly. Good afternoon.
I
Good to
came
see
down
you.
because I was having audio and visual problems, and I wanted to be accessible to you and not make you wait. So I didn't have anything in particular, except I do want to briefly address line number 5801, the salary savings line in Department 30. That amount is there due to a miscommunication that my office had with admin. It's my understanding that admin had actually intended not to populate that amount.
I'm sorry. Could you please tell me the numbers again, page and line? You mentioned it really fast.
Page number 192 in the budget book.
5801 on the bottom, salary savings.
Right.
Thank you.
So at this stage, I am aware of all the work that's gone into the budget book and how much any changes would impact admin and the difficulties that causes. And I am aware that there's an opportunity to adjust that at final budget. However, I'm also cognizant of how much work goes on throughout the year and the efforts that go into adjusting and relooking at it and adjusting again and some of those difficulties. So I would prefer to deal with that today if possible, recognizing the burden that would put on admin, because it was populated with that amount in error. it was a miscommunication that my office had with admin following our meeting in preparation for this budget.
Ms. Ballmer.
Right, so I would say that perhaps revisiting that at the end of the meeting, but were that to be the only change your board directs, it would cost many thousands of dollars to make that one change in this one budget. And I would recommend that should you direct that that change be brought back at final, that we, district attorney is able to use her currently existing appropriations to do whatever business she would like in the meantime, and then we will fix it then. If your board directs other substantive changes, then it will be easy to incorporate that, but to re-budget and rebalance this entire book, which as a practical matter is what is required in order to make any changes at this point, for one change would not be efficient or cost effective. No disrespect to the district attorney, just a practical reality of life.
And I'm cognizant of that, so I kind of hesitated to bring it up. However, one of the big issues for my office is that we deferred filling a position for an entire year, and we really need that position. And so if we wait until final, we're again caught behind the ball, and I certainly don't want to take steps to fill a position and then be caught short. So it's that little bit of balancing act.
Understood. And I think
yeah.
my point is if you guys say, go ahead and fill and fix it, we'll fix it at final, then that's, I think, sufficient for you.
This is the same point you brought up at mid-year.
I actually did not come in at mid-year. I took it as a challenge to live with what we had. It's what I brought last time at final,
right.
And my direction at that point was, well, let's see how it goes at mid-year. So we tried to make it, and we did squeak by this year. However, the fallout from taking this cut last year was that I did effectively lose a position. I was not able to fill a position, and we wiped out our litigation budget. So we were very fortunate that the real-time analysis and the real-time progress of our cases did not result in us having to come back to the board to ask for money to carry out our cases. So it was a very tough decision at mid-year not to seek that infusion. Michael Hatfield and I had many discussions about whether or not we wanted to come back and ask for the infusion. We just ultimately decided not to, and while I was not here and I was not obviously sitting in your seats, I remember how difficult that was at mid-year. So my hope this year and my request this year is to just deal with it now so that we don't end up in that position at final or at mid-year.
So I'm hearing two different things. You're asking to deal with it now so we don't have to deal with it at final. And you're suggesting that we finish out and do the change at final because it's not cost effective to make that one change at this time.
I think we can walk the line here, which is where there are more than sufficient appropriations in this budget unit for DAU to fill that position. The question, the issue at hand is that if the adjustment is not made in September, then there will be an appropriations problem towards the end of next fiscal year. Part of the reason for the recommendation to not re-implement, and I note that there was a miscommunication, but it was actually in the department requested budget, which is where so we just didn't catch it until the budget book was done. But regardless, the reason for agreeing with DAU to recommend not re-implementing that cut is because this budget unit, which has historically experienced substantial salary and other savings, did not do so this year. And so really it is absolutely accurate to say that there was a question at mid-year about whether, it was definitely, I would have understood it had the district attorney asked for an adjustment at that point. So clearly up to you, but if you're amenable to allowing DAU to go ahead and proceed with filling that position and want to still, with the understanding that that we might be unwinding that cut, we would be unwinding that cut in September unless you guys direct me to make a bunch of other changes, in which case we'll do it now along with all the rest of them.
All right.
Either way, it works.
To Ms. Callaway's chagrin, I'm going to pull the board. Mr. Toffenelli.
What are you pulling for?
To let her fill the position for the time being, and then we make the appropriate adjustment at final budget.
Correct.
And it's on the $130,000 mark.
132,178.
I have that amount. Sure. You need to advertise it, you need to put it out there, it's not out there, so we have to
Correct.
go through that whole thing and then background. So if we put it out there now and get somebody a candidate, my final budget would be anyway, so sure.
Ms. Callaway.
So what position is this, Ms. Young?
It's one of our support staff positions. It's the DA services tech.
Well, no, they're going to need backgrounding.
She's going to get
I
served.
will if she goes to the gym.
Oh, there you go, there's a challenge.
So really, the question is, we're authorizing the position now, make adjustments down the road, whatever. What I thought I heard you say is, if there isn't the revenue, then there isn't a position.
So.
I mean, that's not fair. Either she gets it or she doesn't get it.
No, let me rephrase that. So the position is already on the books. It's already technically budgeted, except for the fact that we have re-implemented this 5.3% cut for the second year in a row. And so in order to fill it comfortably without having to worry later on down the road about whether or not there would be salary or other savings to cover the cost, and there have not been this year, this current fiscal year, then she could go ahead, get it out for recruitment, do the recruitment, fill it, but your board would need to understand the recommendation, and what would need to happen at final would be to unwind that 5.3% cut in the amount of $132,718. And like I say, if you end up directing other changes this afternoon or tomorrow, then we would incorporate it with those changes now. But if this is the only one, then I will incorporate that in the final budget that comes in September.
We could take it from 172.
That is.
DA is.
That is, it would be an
meets the
appropriate
requirement.
use of 172 funds indeed.
I support the position, not on again, off again, but on again.
So basically, you want our word, we're going to come through on this in the end, so you can begin the hiring process.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to keep the 5.3%, but you can have it. Yes.
Do I have to go to the gym with Marita?
Yes.
At least one.
Yes.
Pictures, we
And if you can get some guest membership cards too, since now we know the price per vote, we all may want to go into the gym too.
Okay, thank you.
No comment. I don't want the DA prosecuting me for anything of the sort. Thank you, Ms. Yuck. We appreciate your time. Any further questions for the DA while she's here? I think we're good. I just received a message from Mr. Oliver. He thought the code compliance unit would be discussed separately from the building department. Can we please go back to the building department budget and give Mr. Oliver the opportunity?
It's okay.
All right, you're okay? All right.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. I apologize for upsetting the mix here. I have two budget units, and I was waiting for the code compliance to come around. So once you went to the DA, I figured I made an error that I needed to correct. As you'll see in our code compliance budget, pursuant to your board's adopting our new fee structure, we are not asking for any general fund money for that budget unit, but we are essentially directing funds from the operating revenue of the building unit to pay for the code compliance unit, and the revenue generated by code compliance unit is part of our building revenue. That means that there's a few extra transfers between units in order to make this look on paper like it functions per your last board's fee adoption. That being said, I had talked to CAO Krista Von Lana a couple of months ago about the matter of merging the two budget units. We did not have time to do it during the preliminary budget, but I wanted to bring it up now as an opportunity to make the necessary corrections for the final budget, if that is your wish. In essence, what we're doing is we're recognizing that code compliance is now part of the building department, as it really always had been, but it was broken out originally because of the separate funding sources that we are no longer using, and it is just more efficient to have that budget unit back into the building department budget unit where it should be. I'm just looking for consent on whether we should move forward with that for the final budget, or whether we should wait a year and come at it at the next budget cycle.
Ms. Von Lana, do you find it attainable to be able to get that into the final budget? Or would it be
We
more?
we can certainly do it. It's not a problem to do it. It's probably 6 one and a half dozen to the other. It will be a little awkward looking at the budgets in the budget book itself because they'll be totally different. But we can certainly do it if that's what the board directs. I have no position really one way or the other in terms of whether it's done. In terms of when it's done, it's really neither here nor there. It's fine.
Mr. Oliver, this will make your life easier.
In future budgets, yeah, it would eliminate a little bit of head scratching, and it is a good show for staff morale, because I think it's pretty widely known that the code compliance unit has kind of felt like it's been on the outside. They are part of the team. They are part of the building department. And I feel it's good for morale and it's good for our efficiency. However, if your board decides that it is suitable to just go ahead and plan to implement that unification of our units for the next budget cycle, I'm happy to do that as well, as long as I have some direction one way or the other on that.
Mr. Toffenelli.
Yeah, the only question I would have on what you're wanting to do, and I certainly don't have a problem with it, making your life easier, is whether Kathy Gomes has an issue with that. If there's going to be a problem with her doing what you're asking.
Ms. Gomes, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. I don't have a real issue. We would still have to approach any liens or code issues in the same manner as we always have, in terms of whether we would have to place it on the tax roll. The same rules would follow. So there would be the same sort of scrutiny within our office, depending on what the actual program is, whether it's building and transfers related to them, or code compliance issues and liens and transfers related to them.
Thank you. Mr. Toffenelli.
That was all I had.
So, are you in favor of unifying the two?
Sure.
That's a yes. Ms. Callaway?
I have some questions.
Absolutely.
Mr. Oliver, I feel like what I'm hearing is we're going to be using code enforcement revenue to subsidize the building department. I mean, that's what I'm trying to see, other departments have several budget units similar to this, and I'm not clear how this, except maybe making it easier for the department head at budget time, I'm not clear what this is doing. Because if we want to know what it costs us to manage the wonderful work that code enforcement does, I'm sure every supervisor feels that way. I mean, how are we now tracking that? Because it's not going to exist.
To answer your questions, one, for the tracking of the work that we're doing, the permit processing software we have also handles our case management now. So the amount of stops, the amount of cases, the types of cases, the amount of time spent on each case, that's all tracked independently of budget. In addition, the way the fee structure was adopted versus our nuisance abatement process, they're two distinctly different things. So the case management component and the fees that your board adopted specifically to that is charged like a building service. However, as discussed in the fee hearing, your abatement, your nuisance abatement, is where the citation ends and the other program begins. And so we have a separate revenue fund for the collection of fines and the collection of abatement costs, which are separate than our building services. And that's a revolving fund that will continue to pay for abatement itself. So we've got it broken out to where nuisance abatement is isolated or insulated in a special revenue fund, and that is now being used specifically for that purpose. So there's no mingling of money, and there's no ambiguity that we may argue was around in previous years. Yes, this, as I said, this does make it a little bit easier in the budgeting overall. We have all the tracking measures that your board can utilize to track performance, and I'm happy to produce those documents as you need them, or quarterly if you wish. In addition, we do have a very clear line in the stand as to what revenue goes where and what funds are used to effectively do the job.
So I'm not clear, how does this make it easier for you? Not that I don't want to make it easier for you.
Well, mind the constant distribution of revenue across units. We're one department, we're one unit. I'd like to have one budget to represent that. And we're in a unique position to do that. So, I mean, like I said, if this is something that is too complex to put together in this time frame for the final budget, then I would like to do it next year. But like I said, it's both for morale and it's both for streamlining purposes. I'd like to have it in one basket, if you will.
That's fine. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure I comprehend it all, but thank you, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Callaway, did you have a position on that, or not at this time? Okay, yeah, I hear you now. Ms. Fullendorf?
I'm even more confused than we voted on this now, but I'm just gonna go to simplify it. You, regardless of these numbers, you just want to combine the two departments. Is that the end goal here?
Yes.
Okay. I think next time we just might want to start with that. Yes, I have no issue with that. It just, the budget, it just threw me off. Okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with them, going under one roof.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Toffenelli.
I just have one other question. HR, Judy, is this going to be a problem with her? Are we going to reclassify people?
I imagine she is on, and I defer to her. Oh, I hear now.
I'm right here. So what will be required of my department is we will have to reassign position control numbers to some of the employees. We have done this before, so we do have existing numbers that can be used.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be the fourth vote. Yes, Doug, I don't want code compliance to feel like the redheaded stepchild.
Thank you, sir.
Thank them for their good work.
I will, thank you.
Is that all, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. I need to make sure I didn't skip anything. We went to the DA, or environmental management. Any questions by board members? Does Lisa want to talk about rabies shots?
I did this morning. Thank you, Chair Stopper.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Did you have anything you wanted to talk about, or are you comfortable with what's shown here now?
Yes, very comfortable, and I would like to respectfully thank the board for acknowledging our animal services shelter. We are very enthusiastic, more beyond happy, and we're looking forward to continuing to service our Calaveras community and our little fur babies.
Thank you.
I am beyond happy too.
Marita says she's happy also. Next time she needs to turn on her microphone so she can let you hear.
Do I have to go work out at the gym too?
Marita would like you to.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
respective board members.
We'll move on to Health and Human Services Agency. Any questions by board members? Any statements by Ms. Allen? With that,
But I am here for questions.
Is that somebody's mic on still? Oh, is that Ms. Allen?
I think so.
I was just saying I don't have anything to add at this moment, but I am available for questions, along with obviously your CAO, and our fiscal team is available as well.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. I think at this time the board's comfortable with what's being shown here. Move on to Human Resources and Risk Management. Oh, did somebody have something? Okay, yeah, it is. I can't, I mean, if I could relocate it, I would, but I can't, so you can sit here with it. Well, Human Resources and Risk Management. Ms. Hawkins, board members, any statements, questions? Okay, good. We'll move on to information technology. Any board questions? Mr. Moore? Ms. Von Lotta, I mean, you're over at administration, but this is Mr. Moore's dig.
Nothing to comment on from my side from information technology.
Thank you, sir. Integrated waste management. I mean, we got a long conversation coming in August. Mr. Ferriani, anything? Board members, any questions? Library? Board members, Ms. Giddens, Mr. Toffenelli.
Yes, I'm going to go back to page number 41. Library. We've doubled the funding for the library from last year. We went from 309,832 to 659,664. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. Just one moment.
That's general fund contribution, not our total budget, it's the general fund.
Yes. There were major, oops, sorry. So when we look at this budget unit, we can see a massive difference in overall revenue due to decreased grant funding this coming fiscal year over what has been this current fiscal year. In addition, we've seen an increase in overall, and I'll scroll down to the bottom here, but you can see as it relates to salaries and employee benefits, so almost $100,000 there between those two things. And we were fortunate to have the grant funding that we did, and I'll defer to Ms. Giddens to explain to your board about that. But when we look back actually at actuals, so for example here it was $535,000 back in 1920. The year-to-date actuals for 2021 are $477,896. So we can see that it's not actually that far off. We're just not enjoying the grant funding that we had in this current year.
Well, I'm saying the budget is not that much different, but the general fund contribution has doubled. That's why I went back to page 41. This is not going to tell me general fund dollars, which is her budget. Her budget was $912 last year, it's $942 this year. But you go back to this page 41, and it was only 300 and something thousand last year of general fund. This year we doubled it to over 600,000 of general fund dollars. And so it wasn't a question about her budget being over that, is why did we increase general fund? Did she lose that much in revenue?
Grant funding.
She lost a very large grant, and if you look here, you'll see for 1920, the general fund contribution was $535,000. So this current year, this is for 1920 actual. General fund contribution was $535,000, and I do believe we've added a position since then.
That grant funding, a lot of that was like the lunch services,
And the bookmobile.
and the bookmobile.
So
that was specific. And are we continuing the lunch services?
So far as I believe, in fact, I believe that there are increased lunch services, and that, I would defer to Ms. Giddens if she's available, but my understanding is that they're serving more lunches, not for your...
Right.
That was my understanding when she gave the presentation.
she gave a presentation, yeah, that we are, and the bookmobile. Okay, well, I was just wondering, so you're saying it was, the difference is from last year to this year is a grant?
Yeah, let me scroll back up so it's a little easier to visualize. So, right, so these funds here that are budgeted for state grants for $269,512, that was for this current fiscal year. $170,000 of that can be found down on the capital assets line item for this current fiscal year, and that was for the bookmobile. That cost has gone down for this year, but it still remains. In addition, I believe that there were matches from the Friends of the Library. Special revenue fund transfer in to cover part of the offset from the grant, but the grant has essentially been received. So between that and then just MOU and other salary increases, at the end of the day, it's not as dramatic as it looks, because like I pointed out, if we look back just as recently as fiscal year 1920 actuals, the actual general fund contribution in that fiscal year was $535,000. And I'm not entirely sure, although I can certainly look up what the final budget amount was for that year. I suspect it might have been higher.
Okay, all right. That's all. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Office of Emergency Services. Okay, let's move on to probation.
Wait a minute, I do.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Toffanelli. Go ahead.
You spoke earlier about the effects of the Butte fire and not being able to bill anymore and showing that. We don't show that as income. Do we know what's outstanding that FEMA hasn't paid yet? Do we have any number that has been billed or needs to be billed that is still there that we won't recognize until we receive it? That's not in this budget.
No, it's not in this budget for revenue. What is I'm hoping Director Osborne is on the line because he's been looking into this.
I mean, we talked last year that it was like $3 million, that we were getting $1 million sometime in September.
We did receive some funds in this current fiscal year.
I would like to know what's outstanding that we possibly could be receiving now that we're closing out this year, and it will obviously be into next year that we'll see some of that funding come in. If whatever amount is out there, it still hasn't been paid.
Okay, we may need to circle back to this as I'm not hearing Director Osborne on the line. One moment.
Madam CAO, I am here.
Great, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I was on the phone when I was multitasking. Supervisor Toffanelli, what was your question, sir?
The question, you wanted me to repeat the question to you?
Yes, sir, please.
The question is on FEMA and Butte Fire. How much outstanding that we billed FEMA and they haven't paid, we haven't been received yet? And do we have any more out there to bill for? And what is that number if so?
So I'll address that first. The only remaining project in the Butte Fire is Project 78. It is phase 2. It's 1,545 hazard trees to be removed. Thank you, Krista. You were right on top of that. Perfect. And you'll see that in this budget here. There's approximately $1.87 million in work to do there. About 800 of that is project management, and the rest is actual tree cutting. So that's the only thing outstanding. We have a path forward on that. That's why it's included in this budget. You'll see a request for an amendment to our contract with TSS Renewables on the June 22nd meeting to move forward with that. We hope to have these trees cut down by the end of this calendar year, and then we will completely close out the Butte Fire DR.
Have we received all of the funds that we billed for from FEMA?
We have just closed, in regards to the Butte Fire, we have closed all but 78, and I believe we just closed. We have not received a couple of them. I have to dig this. Let me get to. Bear with me for just 1 second, sir.
Sure.
So we have requested that they close out project 99, and that was requested April 19th. So we haven't received those funds.
How much is that?
I can tell you I am looking at the close request at $987,073.13. Of that request, I do not know off the top of my head what we received beforehand. And then in addition to that, on the same closure date, we requested Project 88 in the amount of $373,994.85. Again, I don't know if we received any advances on that request, but that was the final closeout request.
Okay.
That's,
So if we haven't received any of it, then we're looking at about 1.3 million?
1.35, 36.
So, Director Osborne, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you state that it's not clear which monies we might have already received, are you speaking there about the advanced funds? And if so, do you have any idea to what extent the 1.35 might be offset by that?
It's 1.36 and some change. And let me look in another spot to see if I have.
You can certainly hear.
By looking, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to make a statement before you chimed in. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop waiting for you to answer.
That's because I'm trying to remember the project number and the DR number, and I was focused for you. The amount received, or the amount in Project 88 appears to be $36,193. I would defer to the auditor's office, Ms. Gomes, to confirm that for Project 88 and Project 99. It shows an amount recovered of $350,662. So most of 99, or I'm sorry, 350,000 of that 987,000 looks like we have received it at some point. And then for Project 88, a pretty nominal amount, 36,000. And again, I would defer to the auditor's office to confirm those numbers.
That's still about 1 million, close to 1 million. Okay, thank you. And that's all been billed and closed out, and we're waiting just to get the final payment from FEMA for those two projects.
Yeah, those projects are in closeout. Project 99 that was actually a guinea pig way project that Cal OES did in the method that they executed that. So it may take quite a while to to reconcile that. But I keep tabs on that one and as well as the Project 88.
Okay. Thank you, John.
You're welcome, sir.
There's actually quite a bit of progress since even just 2 years ago, you know, at closing those out.
That was probably where you see some of those numbers.
But until we realize them, we have more directions. Yes, sir. Agreed. Are we comfortable with OES? Let's move to planning. Any questions? Plan probation. I think Sam's a lot more comfortable back in his old seat. Public access TV. Mr. Leach, did you have something to say?
Yes. I was just going to concur and thank you for that, but yes, very happy.
Oh, I'm happy to see your face again. You know, we missed it the last few meetings, so.
Thank you. I miss you guys as I dwindle in obscurity over here. So, joking aside, thank you guys and good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you. Public access TV. Public Works. I think Ms. Callaway already touched on the RIM funds earlier. I don't have further questions on that personally. The sheriff.
Oh my God, it's going to take the rest of the day.
Oh, what?
You want 3 new employees, or those 3 new employees? Or the 3 new employees in this?
They are. If it's only the employees you wish to discuss, then we could do that all together at the end with the other positions.
Right. Is there anything?
Indeed, yes, yes.
Anything other than the salary positions that you would like to discuss, Ms. Callaway? Lights on.
I've already discussed it with the sheriff.
Very good.
Refrigerated unit?
With that?
Yes, the refrigerated unit.
Keep your ice cream in there?
Well, I'm sure how fresh that looks today. It's treasurer tax collector.
I want to know, is there going to be a snow plow under the Bearcat? Is that in the budget?
Under the Bearcat?
Yeah.
There is a snowplow on the capital assets list, I do
I
believe.
wanted one for the sheriff, a plow for the sheriff's
He wants
Bearcat.
one. She wants one on the Bearcat.
I am.
Ms. Callaway, this is the sheriff. If you want to buy me a snowplow for that Bearcat, I will absolutely put one on there.
I didn't think he was listening.
Well, now, he wouldn't be, he's a sheriff.
He's holding out. All right, let's move on to the treasurer tax collector and leave the Bearscat behind. Special districts. Do you have something on special districts, Ms. Callaway? It's green.
Not on special districts, on the special revenue funds. I had a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay.
May I ask what page?
In the beginning.
Okay, Susan. I just want to confirm my memory. We're not doing the 27th payroll anymore?
So we are still anticipating to make the 27th payroll payment into the PERS unfunded liability section 115 trust prior to the end of the fiscal year. We do not have in place any policy or refunding of this fund at this point. So that is certainly something for your board to consider as we move forward. But as a reminder, the Section 115 trust funds can be used for any PERS-related, retirement-related reimbursement. So were we to hit the 27th payroll without having available general funds to make those that expenditure, then what we could do would be to offset our unfunded liability, for example, via the Section 115 trust to free up general fund dollars, and then it would essentially get us to the same place. But no, in terms of ongoing mechanism for refilling that fund, there is nothing in place.
We're not going to do that.
That's for your board to determine, but there's nothing in place at this time.
Because that was a pretty hefty amount.
Approximately 1.5 million,
Right.
just shy of 1.5 million.
Okay, just,
We always did that.
right, but I remember, and it was last year before, we put it into paying down PERS liability.
That was not funded last year. We're working on getting it funded this year, right now, between now and June 30th. But, and I confess, and perhaps the auditor controller could fill in my institutional knowledge here. I don't know when this fund stopped receiving revenues, or whether this was simply a set aside of a lump sum
It
at
was
one.
a set out. Sorry, nothing. It was, where's that gone? It was a set aside.
Okay.
Because it was a significant amount of money, correct me, Gary? And when times were bad, which happened,
Yes.
we had the revenue to pay it.
Okay.
So I didn't know if that is a recommendation from your office, or is that something that the board should be making? I mean, we look to your office as the budget gurus.
Sure.
And if you think there's enough on the long-term basis, I mean, we can look at it, I guess, at final budget, but I just saw there was nothing in there.
My recommendation for that at this point, although certainly we'll give it some additional thought between now and adopted budget and some additional communication with my colleagues, but would be for that to be something that the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee might want to take up over the course of the next year while looking at other resiliency type measures, and then bringing those recommendations back to the board.
I would throw it in Amanda's lap also.
Since she's the only one in here on that committee, then yes, I think.
You've been voluntold.
Well, when is that, how far are we till we hit the 27 payroll?
I believe is somewhere around 2027, 26, 27, 28. It's right in there. I can double check and get back to you on that.
And what started it is that we were grasping for dollars to pay it. And I thought we don't want to be in that position
Ever again. Yeah.
So I guess I'd look to your office for advice on whether we should or shouldn't. My second is on the water enhancement program. Is that the $900, the in lieu for water? And what makes it even more of an issue is what's happening with the Board of Forestry, as Mr. Oliver talked about with us, that people are focused on roads, but there's a water component to the rules that take effect in October. So I didn't know if that was, the water enhancement program was the same as the in lieu, the $900 in lieu.
It is.
Thank
It
you.
is.
Yes, that's my understanding.
So is there something maybe we should be doing with those funds, or programming them, or looking at them based on the kinds of things Mr. Oliver talked to us about? That would be a further discussion down the road, not at this point in time.
Sure.
But
I will.
it looks like there's no money coming in for 21-22.
Actually, this budget unit needs to be budgeted at the final adopted budget, so we'll bring back modifications to this budget, including some budgeting of revenues. Year-to-date was $48,000, so we'll see whether or not this $54,000 comes to fruition. And if appropriate, I will certainly reach out to Mr. Oliver and see what his thoughts are on the matter. But we'll bring better additional recommendations as it relates to this budget in September.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on that, Ms. Callaway? With that, I think we're at a point where we'll be moving on to the salaries and employees part. I do believe that Mr. Garamendi did have a lot of questions along with other supervisors. I would, we're getting close to 4 o'clock right now. Will we be comfortable coming back tomorrow morning and including Mr. Garamendi in the conversation?
Is he not coming back today?
He doesn't know how long it'll take. So, I mean, here, can we take a 5-minute break? Sure. And I'll reach out to him and see when he's coming. Right, no, we're real close, and I'm willing to take the push also, so. Thank you, welcome back, Mr. Garamendi, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for 30 minutes, Mr. Chair.
So we finished up with the general budget. At this time, we were getting ready to move on to salaries and position control list. Is there anything you've got to say?
Yeah, thank you. If at the pleasure of the board, I apologize for stepping out for 30 minutes. I had a personal thing I had to take care of. I had no idea you guys were going to be able to get through a budget this quick, so I'm duly impressed. But one of the items I was hoping we could discuss at this time was public access TV. And if there's the desire from the board or willingness to go back and talk about it, I would like to. However, if there's not the willingness, well, there's nothing I can do about that.
Mr. Toffenelli?
I think you go back out, I won't change my vote.
Understood. Ms. Callaway? Okay. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Ms. Fullendorf?
We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
All right. Thank you very much. Here's my concern. Public access TV spends, we spend roughly, we spend $167,000 of general fund dollars in order to match or get that $85,000 of franchise fees. So we're spending, $200,000 on salaries and benefits overall. My thought, and we have a building that the county owns down, over here in San Andreas. We talk all the time about we don't have space for people. And I want to suggest that perhaps the world has changed, and we learned a lot about that in COVID, that we don't need a television studio in order to communicate with the public. Any kid with an iPhone and an internet connection can do an interview and post it online. And fewer and fewer people are using our public access channels. In fact, I'd be interested who's watching it at all. So I think that we can still do the communications with our public, do the work that people like Susan do in communicating and posting this stuff online. But I think the world has evolved past having to have a hard studio and all the costs that are associated with that. So my suggestion would be to take some of that money that we use from general fund and put it in something like IT in order to communicate with the public and, in essence, eliminate PATV, which will eliminate our access to $85,000. But there's going to still be savings to our general fund as well as space. So I know nobody likes to talk about this. We like PATV. They're nice people. This isn't about them. It's just, are we willing to evolve past what we've done historically and move forward into the future and save money? That's what I wanted to see if there was interest in that.
Ms. Fullendorf?
I am interested in reevaluating and considering that, especially since with COVID, and wanting to evolve and get into the 21st century. I mean, even us as board members, we want to do town halls and do certain things, and we just don't have the equipment. And if we utilize some of these changes that Jack is suggesting, I think we can get there. Not tomorrow, not today, but start the process of the conversation of what did it look like in the next couple of years. And I recognize that there are still a lot of people that utilize the cable TV and are not using a Roku or Netflix. But I feel that we need to at least have the conversation and be honest with ourselves of what this cost really means.
Ms. Callaway, Mr. Toffenelli, either of you have comments to these points?
I'll say. I understand what Jack's saying and Amanda, but I think $167,000 in the total budget that we have in front of us with the $78 million in general fund is a drop in the bucket. I believe it provides a social and a good service to our constituents. It's being filmed here right now. That goes on YouTube. People go, you look at the views on YouTube on this. There are programs that people talk about all the time that I hear about that are on PEG TV. I think $167,000 is just a drop in the bucket for what we are getting for that money. I think it's well spent. I think Mr. Lark does a great job with the amount of money he has. You're looking at, what is it, $257,000 for what he provides? I can't see it. I mean, I think it's a great service to our constituents.
Ms. Callaway?
I agree with Gary. Years ago, we used to have fights in the boardroom about all these different community groups wanting an allocation of funds. And anyway, we've evolved where we really don't give that money out anymore. But what this money does is services some of those groups and programs that we no longer fund as a county. And I look at what some other counties have done, and they do give to their community organizations, but you know, the chamber uses it, education system uses it, the program with Dr. Thompson, the Doctors In program, the ones that Tammy Bilstein does, the ones that Kathy, I don't know if she still does, I haven't seen it. So I think it serves a larger audience than just the Board of Supervisors, and I am sometimes amazed at people saying, oh, I saw that on community TV. So even though, there isn't maybe a mechanism, maybe there is, to know how many people tune in, I think we as a county, in a holistic way, get a return on that investment. And other groups get a return because of the funding from the county. So it's not that I'm totally for moving into the 21st century, and maybe there's a way to do it, but I believe community TV serves a purpose other than just the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Ms. Callaway. I get both sides. There's definitely a movement towards the 21st century that needs to be made, but there is a segment of the community that uses this service because they aren't part of the 21st century when it comes to what types of devices they use. There are many people that give me a call from my district that don't use computers. They don't trust them. I was like, can I email you the information? No. They use public access TV because that's what they know. That's what they're comfortable with. I'm actually surprised that, there are people younger than me that I work with that are like, watch you on public access TV yesterday, learn something about the board, and how often they actually do watch it. I'm surprised at some of the people that do. It just amazes me. So I think that in the sense I do agree with you, I think it's a longer-term transition that needs to happen. I don't think it's something that's going to happen right now. I think we need to hold on to what we have right now so that we can continue to provide those services to the people that use that service within the community that don't use the 21st century type of equipment. And then, in a long term, move on to that transition. And, with that. Is there something further you want to add to that, Ms. Follendorf?
Yes, I think it goes back to earlier conversations we had the last couple months of strategic planning, and I think this is a perfect example of where there's a crossroad of wanting to make some changes without losing it, and how do you get to that? And maybe it's something we bring back to the strategic planning committee and finance committee. Well, what does that look like? And I don't think the intent is to cut budget this year. It's the conversation of, can we start talking about it for the future? So would the board entertain that, and how do we bring a hybrid? Do we, going back to what Jack, Supervisor Garamendi is saying, do we really need to have the location if we provide them the technology? Do we need to be paying for a building when you can have a smaller green room in the overflow? I mean, so those are, I think, some of the things that to dive deeper into with those items. I don't think the intent, at least my intent, is not to cut it this year. I want to talk about it and look how we can plan down the road.
I see where things are going. Amanda and I will obviously continue to talk about this in strategic planning. I'm going to point out that we're not moving into the 21st century. We're 21 years into the 21st century. So we're already there. And I'm not suggesting we don't communicate. I'm suggesting that we could have a higher and better use for that building, like selling and building an animal shelter, and we could have higher uses for the dollars, like deputy sheriffs or other things. So these are value judgments we make as a board. I hear the perspective of the board, and thank you for listening.
All right, let's move on to salaries and the position control list. Ms. Von Lotta, I would definitely want to be a part of this discussion when it comes to the assessor's office. I'd like to segment that out separately so I can maybe recuse myself from that part of it. I appreciate it.
I have one more question. Krista, How come the clerk to the board is not under the Board of Supervisors budget? It's under the clerk, it's under the clerk recorder, but not under the budget unit of the Board of Supervisors. I was just,
It's a good question, honestly. I haven't given it, candidly, I haven't given it much thought, other than the supervisors themselves. At least during my tenure, we haven't had any other salaries or benefits coming out of that budget unit. The clerk of the board is under the clerk recorder, and so, and I'm not sure it might actually be split among more than one budget unit, but I don't. Sorry? Wonderful. Ms. Turner?
She's also the facilitator for the board budget also, so yeah, I'll let her explain it.
So technically, the reason is the clerk to the board is under the county clerk's department, because by virtue of being the county clerk, I'm the clerk of the board until the board, by ordinance, changes that in some manner. So right now, in our department, we look as the clerk of the board as being a county clerk. Does that make sense?
yes, thank you.
Okay, it's by statute, essentially.
Let's move on.
Okay, so you have before you the positions that, as discussed earlier, are already incorporated into the requested appropriations in the budget units that we have looked at so far. Starting from the top, I'll take you back to the conversation that was had at a study session recently where Director Hawkins discussed the substantial outages at the elected officials' positions, assessor, treasurer, tax collector, auditor, controller, and clerk recorder. If you'll recall, at that time, there were several different metrics that were evaluated in terms of comparable salaries for these positions, and they were comprised of different counties, whether it was the sheriff's management unit, I believe SEIU, a couple of other, or at least one other metric. This number, the $68.15, would represent a 24% increase, but that is the average of the outages that were discussed with your board at that time. After discussion with Ms. Hawkins, I am recommending that this increase be implemented. These positions, and the reason why this increase is being brought to you now is because they are so substantially under market, and it has been a very, very long time since they've been adjusted. Should Director Hawkins wish to jump in here, I invite her to do so. But this is the recommendation before you now. Likewise, and by statute or by local ordinance, the board's salaries would follow at a significantly reduced rate.
So I'm sorry, I would like to add in that the reason that we are also making this recommendation is with the upcoming salary class and comp study, this rate would put them in line with our other salaries, and then they can be reviewed further with the salary comp study.
Board member comments, questions? Yes, Mr. Toffenelli.
Are all of these numbers that appear on this list that you have here in this budget book?
Indeed,
They're
yes.
already incorporated in here?
Yes, they are.
So any that we say no to would increase contingencies funds
Yes,
balance. Okay.
projected, yes. And, sorry to interrupt, but just, there are positions that we're not discussing at this moment that are non-general fund, and yeah, okay, thanks. Supervisor Garamendi.
So if we, as I mentioned when we were on the assessor's page, I'm not on board with all the changes that are here. It is just a budget item. I'm not getting into specifics. So my question is, if we hold that reclassification, all those pieces, to keep the budget, we're not increasing much it won't change much of the budget, right?
If
not articulating that well.
So let me rephrase that and see if I'm understanding the question. So if, and we are kind of treading in a bit here to some territory, but in general, any of these positions that weren't approved or modifications, the funds are already budgeted, would remain in the budget, and we could either bring back adjustments at final or what have you. But yes, was that the question?
So we could keep the budget there.
You can keep the budget as it is and say no to the position, and then we fix it at final.
Yeah, I'll just clarify right now. My personal position on the elected positions, until we bring everyone up to level down lower, I think we should be waiting on those. That's just my personal position when it comes to the elected positions. Everything else, I'm taking the assessors out. The positions for the sheriff's department, I'm good with, and everything else that you're suggesting. With that, you know my positions on this. I'm willing to walk out right now and let you debate the thing in its entirety, with the assessor's office included, and I'll recuse myself from the rest. I stay in my position unless you want to say something first, Ms. Cowler.
Yeah, we talked about an assistant CAO.
Oh, yes, I did bring that up. Yes.
So
That's something I would like to be introduced. I did briefly discuss this with Ms. Von Lotta. I think that for administration purposes and possibly future purposes, it may be a good position to add in here. But that, I'm willing to let the board debate and discuss that further, and I can leave it on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I may, maybe if we just separate out the assessor's piece, we finish the other part, and then after your excuse, we could go back to.
You started treading in there. I just want to give them ample opportunity to get myself
I would draw that line
out.
of questioning until later.
Thank you.
So, and if I may just make one point as it relates to the elected official salaries, what I believe Ms. Hawkins was explaining is that there is already so much compaction that it will be difficult to implement class and comp recommendations without coming back, which is not to say that these adjustments couldn't be made at a later date, simply to acknowledge the fact that there is substantial compaction with some of these positions at this time. The other consideration, just for eyes wide open purposes for the board, is clearly that we'll be heading into an election cycle, and so whether these adjustments are made now or later may have some impact one way or the other in an indefinite way as it relates to that. But, sorry, excuse me, thanks.
I think, I understand where Ms. Hawkins is coming from. I understand the timeline. I'm just sold on the position that, if those rates of compaction are part of the holdup, that will be shown in the class and comp study. And until we bring everyone up to the right level, I'm not comfortable raising my salary ahead of theirs.
Understood.
I have a different take on it. One, when it comes to the Board of Supervisors, because of where we sit, we're always reluctant to do anything for board members. And considering we do not get reimbursed for any expenses that we incur, and it always makes nice copy to say the board didn't increase their salaries, but we make substantially less than all the other electeds. We know that going in, and I don't think that there should be any reason that we should not get an increase, nor do I, and I also believe some of the other elected should. As I said, it makes good copy for the newspaper, but, or whatever 21st century social media we use, but in 2 weeks it's going to be something else. And that comes up every time the board has to acknowledge, yes, we should get an increase. When I know all of us pretty much work 7 days a week, we pay for everything that we go to. It sounds good to say, unless everybody else is taken care of, I'm not going to take care of me. That sounds nice, but I think the board deserves an increase. Otherwise, you also start having people only that have money can be members of the Board of Supervisors. And I think the compensation for the board should be raised. And I have no problem with maybe raising the compensation for the other electeds. I mean, the board does it. There's a 60-day waiting period before it goes into effect. And I don't think we should be embarrassed to say that the board deserves an increase.
Further comments? Further comments? Ms. Follendorf.
My comment was, would there be a consideration, I recognize what Supervisor Callaway says, but removing the 5 here, focus on the department or the elected department heads, recognizing that in some of these positions, their subordinate that they oversee and supervise are making close to, if not more, than they are, and go that route, and then discuss ours at a later date. But I think that they need to be recognized. To be appointed of making way more than the people that are under them.
I defer to Ms. Hawkins or Ms. Edwards in terms of the process here.
Yes, if I may, the reason that the increase is calculated in the manner that it is that the board salary is established by ordinance, which is tied to the elected officials. And so when the salary changes for the elected officials, it does change the board salary. And so if you wish, then we would need to rescind that ordinance or change it in a manner. Sarah, I'll let you.
I understand that, but I think from a leadership standpoint is I'm willing to not do that if that means that these other department heads get the raise that they deserve to recognize them, or elected department heads.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you. I was gonna agree with Maria. I think we ought to just get on with it. Jerry O'Brien, who was a 30-year supervisor in Merced County, recently passed away. Once told me, just get on with it. Take that. I'm going to listen to Jerry.
Mr. Toffenelli? Light? I'm not going to label you for this, Gary. Gary, I'm going to need your light on, though, so that we can hear what you have to say.
Well, as far as the 4 elected are listed here, this has been going on for at least a couple of years, especially it comes around budget time. It's been out here. We've denied it every time. And looking at some of the comps around us and what's been presented, I would have to agree with Marita. As far as the Board of Supervisors, it is an ordinance. However, Marita does know that when the adjustments have come, we haven't given this big of a raise to the other electeds in a while, but there are cost of living raises, and each board member makes a determination whether they want to say they'll accept it or not. So you can accept this raise, and you can say, no, I don't want it, and you send a letter to Judy saying that you refuse to take the raise, and then you won't get it. But this is tied, she's correct, there's an ordinance that's tied to this. However, these 4 elected officials that are here have been asking for this for quite a while, and I think they're due it. I don't have an issue, I don't think, with that part of it. And the rest of what comes, it comes. And if we don't want to do it, we don't want it. We can always say we don't accept it. So.
Good point, Mr. Toffenelli. So what I'm hearing is 3 in favor and 2 not. Ms. Fullendorf, do you want to clarify your position?
I just want to make sure that the 4 are compensated. So I'll go with consensus if that's what the consensus is, but I still, and now learning about the ordinance, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify. So we're agreeing to everything with the exception of the assessor, which we'll take after you're out.
That's what I'm hearing. Except for we haven't really discussed the CAO position yet, or the assistant CAO. So right now, I'm hearing 4-1 for the elected positions. Let's say taking the assessor's part out. Is everyone in favor of everything else on this list as presented in the budget?
Adding in the assistant CEO.
And we'll get to that. I'll get to that next.
I do have a question about the sheriffs. Going through the list that we have here that was given to us earlier, there's a number of deputy positions that are vacant, and he's asking for deputies. I know he's calling them Met, and he's calling them the other one, EAT. But I'm looking at a number of Deputy 1, Deputy 2 positions that are open. Are these just going to be another open position that he can't recruit to get? Or is he looking at moving existing deputies around and keeping the other ones vacant? I'm not sure what's going on.
Supervisor Toffenelli, Sheriff DiVasile, I can answer that for you if you'd like.
Okay.
Those positions are positions that we're going to add. We've actually got 4 people that we're putting in the academy in August. If I had these positions, I'd be able to put 6 people into the academy to fill those positions. There was a little bit of time where we were actually full and had to pass on hiring some people that we had on the hook. So as you know, that we have an attrition rate here in the county, and we can attribute it to whatever you want. But these positions would allow me to put more people out on the streets, which is my goal. It always has been the goal of the sheriff's office to get more people out on the streets. So if I had those positions, I'd be able to hire more, drawing a blank here, lateral deputies that are trying to move from other departments. We have hired a couple of those. We'd like to get more, but I need the positions. And then the one position is a sergeant's position for the jail, a correctional sergeant.
Yeah, I understood that one.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm looking at this position list that was given to us, Rick.
Right.
And just under the deputy sheriff, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 deputy positions for those trainees that are open.
That's incorrect. There's not 9 open deputy positions right now.
That was what was presented to us. That's why I'm asking the question.
No, I think you're both correct. So it's 5 open deputy positions and 4 open deputy trainee positions. Is that consistent with what you both understand?
That is correct. The deputy trainee positions are positions that the board gave us quite a while back, Gary, so that we could always put somebody in the academy so that we didn't.
Correct.
So we weren't always falling behind. And here's the problem, is that we were full for a minute there and we did not put people into the academy. We had a retirement and we had 4 people leave to go to other departments. We did pick up some positions, so we're backfilling those positions now. And again, it goes back to the attrition that we consistently have here. These 2 new positions are so that we can fill more positions. Because we have the attrition rate, we'll be able to keep more people on the streets. The salary savings you folks pull back in, and I hate to use the word sweep, but you sweep that money back into the budget every year. So it's not like it's going to hurt the county as a whole, but it's going to help the sheriff's office in maintaining more people on the patrol staff that we need. And again, we've got the 4 trainee positions are ever revolving. So we have 4 people going into the academy now. That's 4 of those 9 that you're talking about. So those 4, and again, I think they're classified as, and Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, extra higher positions at this point, because that's what they are. They're just, they're trainees. Once they hit the streets, then we can put more people into the academy for that 4. It's kind of like the cars. If we don't keep a continuous rotation going, we're always going to be short. We'll never get caught up. We didn't put people into the academy the last time because we were full, and I didn't want to, we had people on the hook to get hired, but I had no place to put them, so they went elsewhere.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
You bet.
And if I can further clarify those trainee positions, we also had asked for those so that our correctional officers that were transitioning over to deputies, they could go through the academy without losing their benefits. Because previously, they would become extra hires, they would lose their benefits, and then become deputies. We created those slots so that they could maintain they would maintain their benefits. That was something that Sheriff DeVasilio had worked with HR to do to make it more beneficial for the correctional officers that wanted to become deputies.
Thank you, Judy.
And for the 4 that we have that are going to the academy, 2 of those are coming out of the jail, Mr. Supervisor Toffenelli, just so you know that we are continuing that program.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
Any further questions on any of the salary positions separate from the assessor's office? And if everyone's okay with that, we'll move on to discussion of the assistant CAO. I'll just make it brief. I'm in support of reopening a position for assistant CAO. I'm not going to get into deep explanation on it. I think you all are well aware of the different ways that it can help us out in the future. Mr. Garamendi.
I'm not opposed to the assistant CAO at all. However, our new CAO is just under 7 hours on the job, and I would like her to come back with a plan for her office and how this would fit in the broad sense, and give her some time to strategize how she wants her team built. I'm not opposed to it. I would like to see it as part of the broader picture.
Good point, Mr. Garamendi. Ms. Foldorf?
Concur.
I agree. I was going to say almost the same thing as Jack was going to say, but.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm in agreement with Jack and Darren.
Okay.
You run your ship.
Okay, yeah, we're all in agreement. Thanks for refining the point, Mr. Garamendi.
So if I were to bring this recommendation back sooner rather than later, is that acceptable to your board?
That's up to you.
Okay. All right.
We'll see when it comes to agenda review.
Understood. Okay, fair enough.
Very good, very good. With that, I'm going to go ahead and walk out of the room for the assessor's office. Please, when you're done, text me, and I will come back. Ms. Fullendorf, do you have the hammer?
Is that yours?
Yes, it is. It's from the veterans. Yeah, thank you.
You get a real chair.
Okay. So we want to, is there any board comment on the accessory list that is in front of us? Ms. Carroll?
I do have a question, and it's to Krista. Krista, obviously you're recommending these, so I assume you're in agreement with what's presented here.
I am. I believe that, and going back to the study session, I think it was clearer, but that just from the perspective of somebody who might be looking to the county for prospective employment, I think that the career ladder aspect of this is important. Just not only in terms of ongoing operations, but in terms of who we might be able to recruit. I personally think that's incredibly important, and we are aware that things like organization charts generally would help with that, but certainly an org chart won't undo or won't compensate for the fact that the structure simply isn't there as it's currently organized. So especially considering that the overall general fund contribution here for the adjustment of these 5 positions is so comparatively minor to the overall appropriations in the budget unit, and understanding that the work that they do feeds our tax revenue, I think I do support this.
Thank you.
Are there any other board comments? Ms. Carroll?
The board's been very hard on the assessor. I mean, this last year, it's been nothing but beat up the assessor. And can't say that Leslie doesn't know how I feel. My comments to her are always no. But I think we lose sight of the fact that she is the department head. We might not agree always with how she might manage the department, or the fact that the roles aren't completed and so forth, or in a timely manner and so forth. But I feel that we need to separate that out. That's an issue that we would like this department head to deal with. That's separate from putting roadblocks in the way of the department head managing the department as they see And we just did it with Krista. We said, it's your department. As Jack so eloquently said, you put down how you want to organize it and you come back to us. I think we need to give that same courtesy to the assessor and separate that out from what it is that we would like the assessor to focus on and do. So I support the recommendations that the assessors put forward. The last time she came through, we said no. And I just think it's time that we move on and start being supportive of what department heads want to do with the organization of their departments. We deal with the budget, and we shouldn't be getting into the weeds of how they want to. We just did it with Mr. Oliver. He wanted to combine code enforcement with the rest of his department. Will it make it easier for you? Will it help you? Yes. Okay, go ahead. You know, Krista, you want to do what you want to do? Go ahead. Assessor, you want to do what you want to do? No. I'm at the point of we need to be supportive and deal with the issues that are important, that we feel are important to the county. And I think we've done that.
Supervisor Germany?
Very good, Marita. I love using my argument on me. Question, we are changing these positions. Have we conferred and have an agreement with labor on these? These are represented positions.
I defer to Ms. Hawkins. I believe there is one position. Ms. Hawkins?
So I am working with SEIU right now. We have had 2 meetings over the changes in the positions, and we are working through some questions in the job descriptions. One of the concerns that SEIU has is that we are essentially eliminating the cadastral GIS technician and taking those duties and adding it to the assessment analyst. This is something that is not unusual for the GIS technician positions to be included in the assessment analyst. In fact, Calaveras County used to have the position of assessment analyst, and those duties lived within that position. The purpose of this is only having one position that does the mapping creates a hardship for the department when this one position is taking vacation, out sick, or the position is vacant. Where if you have those duties within a classification where there is more than one employee, then that hardship is taken away and the work is done more efficiently, faster, and then the work can be caught up faster. And so we are working through those clarifications with SEIU.
I think Marita's got a very good point, and I probably am just capable of getting out of my own way the history of this. I'm not opposed to the number budget. I would be I'm just not sure about all the positions at this point. But, you know, let's see where the chair wants to go.
Are there any other board comments? Okay. I lean more towards what Supervisor Garamendi is saying. I don't mind the dollar amount. I'm just concerned of what that organization chart looks like. Being new, and what I've heard over the last couple months is the complaint of not enough lower techs to do the job and catch up. And so my perspective is it seems it's a little bit top heavy when we should be focusing on the lower manager or the lower position. But then again, we are supposed to be allowing you guys to make those decisions as you see fit. I just don't want it to come back again that we didn't provide enough people when we could be on one of those positions providing more boots on the ground, so to speak. So I just want to be conscientious of that, just based on no history and what I've just heard and comments of going back and forth the last couple of months on that. So, and I just don't want it to come back in another year that some of these things have not been completed and we've given the correct position. So I guess my next question is, will this address the concerns that have been over the last couple months? Because if not, then what are we supporting?
I guess I look at it, 2 of the vacant appraiser positions are going to appraiser aide trainee. So that's doing exactly what it is that you're recommending. And I think Ms. Davis knows what the priorities, what we see as the priorities. And if she thinks she needs this to do it, like the sheriff said, I need X number of deputies so I can get more into school or whatever. We didn't question that. We didn't question Krista. We didn't question code enforcement. But because we're not really getting from the assessor what it is we want, then I guess I go back, we're mixing up how it is she should manage her department, because we think if she does X, she's going to get it done. I think she knows what she has to do to get it done. And if we could be somewhat supportive of that, I mean, anyway, I said what I needed to say, sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay. Supervisor $12? No? Okay. I understand that argument. I guess another, being on the double side of it too, is being an elected official. How do you hold those, she reports to the people. So how do we hold accountability as well internally? And not just a question, how does that work? How do we not end up in a couple of years when this is the only accountability? And we had the phone call earlier this morning that the union doesn't support it either. Support these recommendations. So are we going to be in a situation where in negotiations we've got some issues and we haven't vetted them as well? I don't know. I'm asking, do we have that, Judy? Are you the person to? And I'm doing that based off of public comment earlier this morning, which is like, what, 7 hours ago?
Yeah, I am, like I mentioned earlier, we are meeting and conferring over the job description of the analyst and making sure that we can get on the same page regarding the cadastral technician job duties being in that job description. I think where SEIU is not, has some issues right now is we don't have anybody in the department that can do the mapping duties. And so that's where we are running into some problems at the moment. But we are working through the job descriptions and everything. And I would not bring the positions back for reclassification until all of that was worked out with SEIU.
Okay, so then with that said, understanding where Ms. Callaway's at, should we look at it as a global issue, just approve the monetary, wait till, I don't know how that works with recruitment, but then wait for this to be finalized before we do specific positions?
So in general, that's kind of always the case. It's a two-step process as it relates to amending the position control list, typically when we do it at budget in any event. So the appropriations are what we're determining, or what you're determining today, and then we're taking direction in terms of what to bring back. As Ms. Hawkins explained, we wouldn't even bring back the assessor positions until the time that the union is in an agreement with whatever resolution they've come to. So what you would expect to see, and we intend to bring, will be the positions where we feel like we have clear direction and there is no other consideration regarding union agreement. Those positions will come back on the 22nd along with the recommended budget for your board's approval. And then we would follow up to the extent that the assessor, for example, positions are worked through after that date. Then we would bring it whatever the next available meeting is, and you would have an opportunity in either of those items. The board would have an opportunity to potentially change its direction.
Sorry. So just so I'm crystal clear, so what we're doing right now is if we approve this, we're approving the budget. We are not approving these changes or these positions, correct?
That would have to be done by the position control list, and that will be done by a different, yes.
So we're not, so if we do this, when we bring back to finalize this on the 22nd, is that when that would be approved finally?
Yes. Ms. Edwards, Ms. Hawkins, I did not just misspeak in any way, did I?
No, I agree. This is budgeting the funds and what I would call, I don't know, conceptual approval. But the actual action will need of changing those positions on the position control list will need to come at a subsequent meeting.
On the 22nd. So is there any way that we could approve the budget and then look at these positions a year later, months down the road, or is this all or nothing?
That would be subject to your board direction. It's certainly possible to do it that way.
Because like I said, I'm not opposed to the budget. I just don't understand what these all mean, and I'd like to have the union consent on these changes before we do them. If I could separate the two, I would, but it's not really separating and bringing them back on the 22nd.
Just so I'm clear, are you only referring to the assessor positions at this point?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's direction for your board to consider.
I mean, it's kind of a half-baked plan.
Sorry?
There's only one supervisor.
Right. Yeah. Right. Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry. I misspoke. I didn't.
So do we want to poll before we vote and see what do you?
No, I'm still clear on my position. I feel like, we're going to maybe budget for it now, and then a year from now she doesn't do what we want, and we cancel a position. We're impacting people's lives. I mean, we either say that she is the department head, and she can organize her department as she seems appropriate, like we just told the CAO that she could do, like we just told the sheriff he could do, like we just told the building official that he could do. So if the issue is tasks are not being done that we feel should be done, then let's focus on what those tasks are, not focus on impacting somebody's life. I mean, Jack's point's appropriate, and Judy addressed that they're negotiating with the union. I mean, we would want that done for the assessment analyst, if I understood correctly. So we're not talking about the appraiser aide or the trainees. Or the GIS technician to assessment technician. So I move that we support these. Also, when we bring the reason I'm saying this now is that when we bring the position control list back, Ben's going to be in the room. And I don't think this is a conversation that we want to have with Ben in the room. I mean, then we start picking this apart for whatever reason we might have when he's in the room. So we either agree to it, I believe, in concept, with the understanding that Judy works out the details with the union, but that would be true for any position in any department. So, that's it.
I'm not against the lower positions. I think I'm just a little bit concerned personally on the assistant assessor.
On the
And
which
what
one?
the job description is. I think that's the only one that bothers me within the
Which-
job description.
which one?
That's it. Assistant assessor.
So that job
So
description,
I was trying to take a more global, but if we're going to have this discussion now, I think for me, I have concerns about the position description on not only on one. And I understand that she should, like we've given all the other departments today, but I'm just concerned about it.
Oh, well, I'm concerned about the assistant CAO.
if I may, Ms. Huggins, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that job description would come forward with the position control list, and there would be an opportunity for the board to discuss or make amendments to it, should they wish to do so at that time?
Yes.
Again, is this a conversation that we want to have with Ben? I mean, it's going to be on a list of positions. Oh, let's talk about everything but this. I mean, is he going to jump back and forth and back and forth? I'm just done. I said what I had to say.
So they're going to be back on the position controller?
I'm sorry?
It will come back with the position controller?
The job description, yes.
Okay. Well then,
I agree with Marita. I think if this is what's needed, we've had these discussions. We had a grand jury report. We've always had discussions, Jack, since you've been on this board, and I've been back on this board, about how far behind we are there. If this is going to, what she said she needs to bring us back, then let the union and HR work out the job, what they're going to be called or what they're going to be doing. But if this is what's needed, then let's just do it this time. Let's just do it and see what happens. Obviously, there was some thought gone into this by the assessor, and what Marita has a valid point, in my opinion. I'm willing to go forward with it and see when it comes back to the position control list.
any other board comment? Okay. So do we need to make the motion before Ben comes back? Or what do you need from us before Ben comes back?
Yeah, if we could, forgive me, Supervisor Callaway, if we could pull.
Supervisor Toffenali said yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor? Yes. For 3-1-0, 3-1-1, sorry. I'm thinking, is that right?
3-1.
Yeah, with one abstain, yeah, okay. We'll take a break till he gets back. Oh, he's right here, never mind. You want to pass that?
All right. Thank you, Susan. I'll move on to public comment. Okay?
Go ahead and make your public comment now.
Hi, hello again. This is Andrea Colavita-Pinkham from SEIU. I'm a little upset. I thought this item was going to be pulled from the agenda, and that's the impression that I was under. If I had known it was not going to be pulled from the agenda, my morning comments would have been a little bit different. If you can look back at my morning comments, I even alluded to the fact that I was unfortunate that these items were going to be pulled from the agenda. So I was under a very different impression about what was going to happen today with regards to these items. Now, folks had commented that other department heads got to set up their departments as they see fit. Other departments may not be acting illegally. There are suspicions that the assessor has broken the MOU and is acting in a fashion that is not consistent with the MOU. In that case, we have to dig deeper. Some of the things we have gotten back from our requests for information is that they are operating under a contract that is 27 years old, and that the terms and conditions of it have not been addressed in 27 years. Things like this lead us to ask more questions, that lead to more questions, that make us have to dig deeper and deeper. When you have a situation like that in a department, it can't just be trusted to do things and set things up the way they want to. So again, I think you can tell from my tone, I'm very upset. I thought this item was going to be pulled completely. I would have addressed the board differently this morning had I known that, if it wasn't. And no, this department is not like the sheriff's department or any other department in Calaveras County. And it cannot be trusted to be set up and do things and run things the way it wants to. And until we get to the bottom of things, we are going to be looking at this department with a fine-tooth comb. Thank you very much.
Any further public comment?
No, there are not.
Thank you. At this time, I will close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion to approve everything we've deliberated on today.
I think we do that on the 22nd.
Well, I mean, to bring it back forward. Yeah, never mind. So we're done for today? Or, so, I think we have to say,
Okay.
Well,
There we go. There's the pro.
okay, yeah. I just want to clarify here. I just want to make the right things. So here it is, a PowerPoint budget transfer. Hey.
So today's agenda item is to conduct the public hearing, receive the presentation, and provide the CAO with direction to any requested changes, and then it will actually come back to be adopted at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. So do we have to approve the changes at this time to move forward, or are we done?
It would just be any direction that the board is giving the CAO to bring back when it is adopted on the 22nd.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it clear, Ms. Von Lotta?
Yes, my understanding.
Well, not the whole thing, but.
Right, and that we won't be making any changes to the actual budgeted amounts. We will be taking the board's direction as it relates to the other items and bringing it back then for final adoption, final with, for example, the adjustment to the district attorney's budget. Is that not consistent with your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Hold on, I'm going to hook up. Hey.
Sarah, mute yourself. Supervisor announcements.
Okay.
In compliance with Government Code 53232.3D, Board members shall provide brief reports on any meetings attended at the expense of the local agency and may make other announcements or report out. Supervisor Toffenelli.
I have a Mountain Valley EMS meeting on Thursday at 9:30 in Angels Camp at the fire department building.
Which fire department building?
The one on Old Highway 4.
Madam Supervisor Callaway.
Nothing to report.
I have nothing to report. Supervisor Garamendi.
Mokel did dedicate the new restroom in the park with the Veterans District. It's been a long time coming, but now we have a place for our visitors to go, which is actually a really big deal for us. Railroad Flat inaugurated their own little library in the old school site. So as I mentioned before, it's leased out to BMCRC, and they've got a library and 6 computers hooked up there, and kids already in there. So it's great, good stuff going.
Excellent, Mr. Garamendi. Ms. Fullendorf. Nothing to report. With that, we'll adjourn. Thank you. And I'm never leaving you guys again for 30 minutes. Can't believe you guys got that far.